Five Nights at Freddy's 3, a game that, in my opinion, is simply one of the worst in the entire franchise. The gameplay and feel of this game just doesn't really match up to the feel or even the fear that the rest of the franchise offers, leaving what I would consider a pretty bland experience, which is extremely unfortunate to me because this is the time you actually face down with one man who started everything, the true antagonist of the series, William Afton. And it should be a massively epic and daunting moment for you. This isn't just a possessed, rage-induced animatronic, this is a real person, a real killer who murdered all those children and caused the suits to become possessed. This is unlike anything you, as a player, had faced beforehand, having to defend yourself from an actual human, or as much as a human you can classify someone as, whose insides have turned into Swiss cheese, but a human nevertheless, and one that is coming to kill you. This should be what is considered a terrifying moment for anyone who plays or experiences it, yet it really just doesn't seem to pull it off despite everything seeming to work in its favour on paper. In this video, we're going to be going over why Five Nights at Freddy's 3 is the worst Five Nights at Freddy's game of all time. Now that's not, of course, necessarily saying that it is an awful game. I don't think it is absolutely awful, but it definitely has its downsides, making it what I would consider to be the worst Five Nights at Freddy's game out there. So in this video, we'll be explaining all the reasons to why I do believe that, and of course do remember that this is just my opinion. Your opinion may and probably does differ to me, so by all means I would love to hear what you think is the worst Five Nights at Freddy's game of all time down in the comments below. But all in all, of course, it's an amazing franchise with some amazing games, but yeah, this is just my opinion. But let's waste no more time and let's get straight into the video. So, Five Nights at Freddy's 3 is set in Fazbear's Fright, a new horror attraction filled with relics from the old pizzeria. The whole place has this green colour scheme to it, and I really am not a fan of it at all, to be honest. It just takes that real factor away from the environment and makes it feel more fictional compared to other games. Now, I do know that FNAF was never going for hyper-realistic environments, but I feel like in Five Nights at Freddy's 3 particularly, it really just doesn't sit right with me at all. I also think the horror aspect of Fazbear's Fright feels a bit too forced in my opinion, and that ends up missing out on really injecting fear into the player. Now, let's talk about the office, and in my opinion, the office in this game has to be my least favourite in the entire FNAF franchise. I just think it is way too open to make me feel any sort of fear. I understand that for some this may be very scary because of course the office has no doors at all, meaning there is no way to stop Springtrap when he does get there, but for me it just doesn't hit whatsoever. Now, a reason as to why I do feel this is the case is due to something that the whole community has spoken about at this point, but it's Springtrap's jump scare. I'm not afraid when I see him outside the doorway or coming through the vents because honestly I know I don't need to brace myself for the jump scare because it really sucks and it will not startle me in the slightest. Now, good jump scares are so crucial for games like Five Nights at Freddy's, of course, because if they just don't meet the criteria of being the climax of nights, that's, well, even just for the start of the game, cause players to jump and avoid it at all costs, other than just trying to simply survive. It's going to cause death to only be frustrating right from the get-go. I know that eventually the jump scares wear off and become more frustrating the later on you get in these games, but usually at the start they really do make you jump. To have this be nothing but frustrating right from the beginning of the game is not good whatsoever in my opinion. As from dying, you want to scare the player and cause that fear they obtained from the jump scare to try everything they can to stop it from happening next time. From the very start of Five Nights at Freddy's 3, it's not about let's not die, I really don't want to jump out of my skin again, it's instead please don't die again, I don't want to have to sit through this entire night again. It really does just feel that way in my opinion. And this brings me right on to my next point, the gameplay of Five Nights at Freddy's 3. I just really can't get behind it just because it gets really boring. To be honest, there really is only one real threat, and the only method of stopping them getting into the office is by using audio lures to make them move to certain cameras. I'm not a fan of this at all, to be honest. It completely switches the usual formula that has you interact with the office to try and keep out the threats, which we all know and love, to be honest. Whether it's be closing doors or even just shining your light out the hallway to see if there's anything there. The main gameplay would take take place inside the office, and there would be certain gimmicks when it came to the cameras, such as checking on Foxy in Five Nights at Freddy's 1, or winding the music box in Five Nights at Freddy's 2. Now, the cameras always played more of a secondary part when in actual gameplay, which I think did work absolutely fine. However, in Five Nights at Freddy's 3, the core gameplay primarily revolves around using the cameras, as they really are the only way that you can use the audio laws. The most interaction you get with the office is having to turn to your left to pull up a repair panel. I do feel this complete switch really feels strange and ends up playing a pretty strange way. I understand Scott wanted to try something new, as repeating the exact same formula over and over again would of course get stale. But I do feel this wasn't the best way to go about it at all, and does create a very strange situation where you don't actually feel much of a threat from Springtrap, as you never actually see him outside of your office. And when you do, it's pretty much already too late, so you just have to accept that you have to sit through the whole night all over again. This gameplay gets really boring for me, as I have said before. It makes the office feel pretty flat and bland. For me personally, I really much prefer the feel of Five Nights at Freddy's 1 and 2, with seeing the animatronics outside your office and reacting based on obtaining that information. This does cause more fear, as you know the consequences of what happens when you don't deal with the killer animatronic staring you down. Seeing Springtrap outside your office doesn't make you jump or fill you with any fear whatsoever. To be honest, it just makes you feel hopeless, as you know that, well, you are dead. The gameplay just really doesn't do it for me personally, and is the major letdown with Five Nights at Freddy's 3, since of course, if the gameplay's not good, then how's the game going to be good at all? Of course, there's not really any sort of true storyline to it. Of course, there is lore and everything like that, but I just really don't think that the gameplay's on par with the other games, meaning that it really is, in my opinion, the worst in the entire franchise. However, from a strictly lore perspective, Five Nights at Freddy's 3 is actually the best in the franchise. That is where there are definitely some positives. The amount of secrets and how the story is presented through Scott's classic 8-bit minigames is absolutely amazing in my opinion. This game also gave us the Happiest Day minigame, which is forever iconic. So the story relevance this game has is absolutely vital to the whole franchise. I'm just disappointed that it wasn't able to bring the same impact on the gameplay side of things, which, yeah, like I mentioned, is the real negative with this game. But those were just my thoughts on why Five Nights at Freddy's 3 is the weakest in the whole of the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise. But do be sure to let me know in the comments if you disagree with this, and if you do, why you disagree with it. I'd love to have a conversation about this in the comments below, so be sure to let me know what game you hate the most, and of course why you think that. And if you agree with me, let me know why you agree with me as well, since hopefully there'll be a couple people that have some similar opinions to me, but maybe I will be the only one and this is very controversial. I'd love to hear about all of that in the comments below. But yeah, that does just about wrap up things here. Now, on screen now, you are seeing a link to a video where I go over all the details we know about the Five Nights at Freddy's movie. Hit the link on the screen if that is something you are interested in watching.